The day I got out of prison, two men were waiting for me. My husband, Eric, and my son, Lucas. The sun was blazing, and both of their faces, one big and one small, looked impatient. Eric asked, "After 5 years, have you learned your lesson? Do you know how to get along with people now?" Lucas chimed in, "Aunt Sophia and I don't like dogs, so you can't have one anymore." I chuckled softly, thinking of the silly reason I ended up in prison and the dog I had raised for years, the one Sophia had beaten to death. "Sure," I said, pulling out 2 papers, a divorce agreement and a document to cut ties with Lucas. Eric picked me up from prison. I was pale, with scars from my time inside, but he still looked down on me. He wore a fancy watch and frowned. "Why did it take you so long? I've been waiting for you for half an hour." 30 minutes was something I couldn't even dream of in the past. I used to wait for him outside his office for hours, only to be brushed off. I just smiled weakly. "Sorry to trouble you." As I walked past him, he opened his mouth to say more, but I ignored him. When I reached the car, the window rolled down, and there was Sophia, grinning. "Bianca, you're finally out. We've been waiting for you. It's so hot outside." Eric was worried you'd get heat stroke, so he didn't let me out of the car. "You're not mad, are you?" I didn't respond, and Sophia's smile faded. "Bianca, are you still upset about what happened?" "I'm sorry I let them hurt your dog, but it almost bit me." How ridiculous. A spoiled princess needing bodyguards because she was scared of my gentle dog. Eric fell for her act again. His frown deepened. "Bianca, are you still holding a grudge? If you like dogs so much, I can buy you another one." Then Lucas spoke up, glaring at me. "It was just a dog. It almost bit Aunt Sophia. It deserved to die." My son, the one I carried for 10 months, was defending Sophia like she was his real mother, while I felt like a stranger. Sophia gently scolded him. "Lucas, she's your mother. You shouldn't talk to her like that." But Lucas turned away, thinking someone like me, who had been to prison, didn't deserve to be called his mother. Eric motioned for me to get in the car, and I couldn't help but laugh. Even a dog knows to wag its tail when it sees its owner. But look at our son, Eric. It seems he's forgotten who his real mother is. For over 10 years, I chased after Eric. Everyone knew I loved him. I even went against my parents for him. When his family fell on hard times, he agreed to marry me, but only if my family bailed them out. I pushed my parents to help, knowing his heart still belonged to Sophia, the daughter of the woman who ruined my parents' marriage. I believed love could warm even the coldest heart, but Eric remained distant. He made his family's business a success while my life fell apart. My brother fled abroad, my parents were imprisoned, and Eric only kept me around because I was pregnant. "If it weren't for the baby, you wouldn't have survived either," he'd say. He brought Sophia into his life and gave her everything. Right before I gave birth, she had my dog killed and made soup out of it. "You love dogs, right? Why not try some?" she taunted. Enraged, I slapped her, which led to complications in my pregnancy. Eric had me sent to prison for 5 years, ensuring I never saw my child. "Be grateful," he said. "Lucas doesn't even look like you." When I got out, nothing had changed. Sophia and Lucas despised me, and Eric blamed me for everything. "It was just a dog," he said. "You shouldn't have scarred Sophia." I didn't want to go back to Eric's house. I asked him to take me to my family's old home, but when we got there, it was empty and dark. Lucas, excited to see Sophia, acted like I was the enemy. "You've been mean to Aunt Sophia since you got out. You deserve jail," he shouted. He was too young to understand, but I forgave him. In the end, Eric left me there alone. I snuck into the house through a window. As I searched through my old things, I found letters I had written to Eric years ago. Inside one, I discovered cash hidden by my brother Bruno, left for me when our accounts were frozen. Reading those letters brought back painful memories of my foolish love for Eric. I tore them to pieces, finally letting go of the past. The next morning, Eric called, demanding I return home to apologize to Lucas and Sophia. "Lucas is your son," he said. I smiled bitterly. "Do you really think he looks like my son?" I asked. Eric was stunned. "Let's get a divorce," I continued. "I don't want you or Lucas anymore." He dismissed my words as if I was just trying to hurt him, but I was done fighting for someone who didn't care. I hung up, feeling a strange emptiness inside. At the hotel where I stayed, life went on outside. Kids played, and the street was filled with noise and laughter. The innkeeper told me about good food stalls nearby, and I bought a crepe. As I watched the children play, I thought about my lost time, my broken marriage, and the years I'd never get back. Just as I began to feel some peace, Eric appeared with Lucas. Lucas's eyes were red, filled with confusion and hurt. I couldn't understand why he cared, after all the hatred he had for me. He pulled away from Eric and yelled, "You're not my mom. You don't deserve to be." He ran off, angry, but I wasn't hurt anymore. Eric grabbed my wrist. "Lucas needs you," he said. I shook him off. "You should have told him he's Sophia's child," I replied coldly. Then I walked away, ready to leave the pain and bitterness behind. 5 years of suffering had broken me, but they had broken Eric too. And now, I was ready to finally let go. If this had happened 5 years ago, I would have been thrilled. Now, I didn't care. I smiled and said, "I'll soon be his ex-wife anyway." Eric's expression hardened. The doctor said, "I think I understand why you want a divorce." I smiled but didn't say anything. There were things I needed to discuss with the psychiatrist. He suggested, "If you can't accept your own child, maybe volunteer at an orphanage. Spending time with other children might help you." Eric liked this idea. On our way to pick up Lucas, he called to ask about orphanages. Instead of waiting at the school gate, I asked him to drop me off further away. He opened his mouth to say something, but finally just said, "I'll arrange for Lucas to transfer to a better school. You were right, he deserves it." I didn't respond as I walked away. I didn't go to the orphanage Eric suggested. Instead, I found a woman named Aunt Eva. In her small home, she cared for over a dozen children. Coincidentally, the youngest was the little girl Lucas had bumped into earlier. She had a round face and big, bright eyes. Eva told me, "I've saved up to send them all to school." I patted the little girl's head and asked if I could help. She agreed, but smiled awkwardly. "I can't pay you. All the funds go to feeding them." I shook my head. I didn't need payment. The more time I spent with them, the more I loved these children. When the kindergarten parents' meeting came up, Eva asked me to go in her place. As luck would have it, Selena and Lucas were in the same class. When Lucas saw me with Selena, his eyes widened, and he jumped out of his seat. Lucas had become wild. He ran over and shoved Selena, making her fall hard. She started crying. "Thief," he yelled. "I'm not," she shot back, wiping her tears. Other parents turned to look. Lucas kept calling her a thief, but wouldn't say what she had supposedly stolen. With arrogance, he declared, "You're a thief, a dirty little thief." The other parents, seeing Lucas in fancy clothes, sided with him. They scolded Selena and criticized me for not raising my child right. I stayed quiet, helping Selena up. I sternly asked Lucas. What did she steal from you? Lucas's eyes turned red, tears falling down his cheeks, but he stubbornly bit his lip. She knows what she stole from me. Other parents chimed in, telling me to be gentler. Some even said, "You didn't raise your child properly, so why take it out on someone else?" They ignored Selena, who was still crying, insisting, "No, I didn't steal anything." Just as the noise peaked, the teacher and Eric entered the classroom. "What's going on here?" the teacher asked. Parents quickly started complaining, their angry eyes darting toward me. When Eric noticed me, his expression shifted. Lucas, thinking his dad would back him up, wore a smug grin. "You're a thief. Apologize." "Lucas, apologize," Eric commanded. Lucas froze, glancing around and realizing neither Eric nor I was on his side. His voice turned high with anger. "I won't apologize. She's a thief." "What did she steal from you?" Eric asked sternly. Under pressure, Lucas burst into tears. "Selena stole my mom. She's supposed to be my mom. Why is she helping Selena?" The room fell silent. Parents exchanged awkward glances, realizing Lucas looked a lot like me. One by one, they closed their mouths and returned to their seats. I felt no sympathy for Lucas. I didn't even look at him. Selena wiped her tears and asked if I wanted to comfort Lucas. "It's okay, Bianca. I can handle the meeting by myself," she said. I smiled and patted her head. "No need. I'll stay with you." Eric brought Lucas over to apologize. His eyes were still red, and he looked unhappy. But under Eric's pressure, he lowered his head and mumbled, "Sorry, Selena." She forgave him but teased, "You're always so mean. I thought you didn't have a mom." "Turns out Bianca is your mom. But how come you're nothing like her?" Selena added playfully. Lucas looked like he might cry again. Kids who've been abandoned are often sensitive. I felt amused seeing Lucas's sad face. It made me want to laugh. Eric paused and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't raise Lucas well." "You don't need to apologize to me. He's your son," I replied. As the meeting ended, I packed Selena's bag. Just as we were leaving, Lucas suddenly ran over, grabbed my sleeve, and softly called, "Mom." I paused. "You've mistaken me for someone else. I'm not your mom," I said gently, brushing his hand away as I left with Selena. I had waited 5 years to hear Lucas call me mom. But when it finally happened, it didn't bring me joy. I had hoped for this moment, but I felt lost. After that, Lucas became attached to Selena and me. Whenever I picked Selena up from school, Lucas would be nearby. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, but then he'd look away, pretending not to notice while sneaking glances at me. I acted as if I didn't notice him, ignoring his hopeful looks. Selena started to complain about Lucas being annoying, but soon she shared his messages with me. He said he's transferring to a new school and won't see me anymore. He wanted me to give you something, a card we made for Mother's Day. He spent a long time preparing it. He also said Aunt Sophia moved out and asked if you're coming back. Selena looked at me innocently. "Bianca, are you leaving?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, I'm not leaving." I had no interest in going back to that house. Everything from the past still lingered. Even now, I haven't worn short sleeves again. I was afraid and didn't want to show my scars. My divorce agreement with my lawyer was progressing, but Eric never cooperated. He kept asking for more time to review the terms. My lawyer asked what to do. After thinking it over, I decided to visit him in person. Luckily, Sophia was there too, smiling at me with narrowed eyes. "What's wrong, Bianca? Why are you back? Do you need something?" she asked. A long time ago, I confronted Sophia when I found out Eric liked her and that she was my father's illegitimate daughter. I wanted her out of Eric's life. I never expected her to mock me, calling me delusional. Just then, Eric stormed in, furious. Bianca, don't take your spoiled attitude out on Sophia. I hadn't even done anything, yet I was blamed. Sophia wrapped herself in Eric's jacket, giving me a triumphant smile. Years later, I faced her again. The maid brought tea, and I smiled slightly. I just wanted to see if you still have the nerve to wear short sleeves. Sophia lost it, throwing hot tea at me. You think you'll be better off? Did the people I sent not manage to ruin your hens? I suspected this. The women in prison who came for me with sharpened toothbrush handles, those were probably all arranged by Sophia. She didn't dare ruin my face directly, fearing Eric would notice when I got out. That's why my body is covered in scars. Those 5 years in prison were dark. The hot tea burned my arm and face, but this time I didn't react like I did before. I smiled calmly and said, Sophia, sometimes people become exactly what they hate the most. She froze. Suddenly, Eric rushed in, his eyes widening at my condition. Sophia, why did you? He ordered the maid to call a doctor and started putting ice on my burns. Sophia cried, claiming it wasn't intentional. Eric looked incredulous. Are you saying Bianca poured boiling water on herself just to get attention? Sophia nodded quickly, but Eric laughed coldly. No, Bianca doesn't need to do that. Do you know she asked me for a divorce? She has no reason to play the victim to keep me. Sophia's face paled. The antique clock chimed softly. It was almost time for Lucas to come home. No one must have told him I'd be here. His eyes lit up, and he excitedly called, Mom, as usual. I didn't respond. I said to Eric, I'm here to give you the divorce agreement since you never had time to look at it. If you have questions, please contact my lawyer. I won't be coming back. My words made Sophia tremble with anger. Oh, and one more thing. I turned to Lucas. I want nothing from you, not Lucas or anything from your family. I just want a divorce. Lucas's face went pale. Eric looked shocked. He tried to stop me, but I slipped away. Bianca, this isn't fair to the child, he said. Lucas was only 5, too young to understand. His view of me came from what Sophia and Eric told him. But nothing in life is fair. If I'm supposed to treat Lucas fairly, who will treat me fairly for the 5 years I spent in prison? I looked at Eric. His eyes were focused only on me, not filled with thoughts of Sophia. Bianca, do you really have to be this heartless? He asked. I laughed softly. I'm just learning from how you rejected me back then. So to you, this counts as heartless. As I turned to leave, Lucas clung to my legs, crying hard. Mom, I know I was wrong. It was Aunt Sophia who told me to say those things. I'm sorry, Mom. Please don't leave me. His cries made me frown. I pried his arms off and walked toward the door. As I closed it, Lucas tried to follow, but he cried so hard he lost his balance and fell. Get away! I want Mom to help me. With that, I shut the door, and his cries faded. I took a breath. 5 years ago, Eric thought I would crawl back to him after my release. But he was wrong. I didn't love him or the child as much as he thought.